Meeting to order. Can I get an approval of the agenda, please? Councillor Andrews and Deputy Mayor, all in favor? Carried unanimously. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I have a recommendation that a closed meeting of council be held pursuant to Section 239-2 of the Municipal Act for the purposes of considering the following subject matters: a confidential report from Karen Landry, acting General Manager of Corporate Services, regarding public office holders, including personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. Can I have a motion to move into closed, please? Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Sherwood, all in favor? And that's carried unanimously. We will head into closed. to Orangeville Town Council. Tonight is Monday, February 13th. We've just come out of closed session. We are going to begin by singing our national anthem. So for those who are able, please rise.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
We would like to acknowledge the treaty lands and the territory of the Williams Treaty Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize that Dufferin County is the traditional territory of the Wendat and Haudenosaunee and is home to many Indigenous people today. Tonight's meeting is being aired on public television and/or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. Item number 8 is our Rise and Report from Closed. There's a recommendation that the confidential report from Karen Landry, Acting General Manager of Corporate Services, public office holders regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, be received and that staff proceed as directed. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Sherwood and Councillor McIntosh, any questions or comments? All in favor? Carried unanimously. I'm happy to now turn the chair over to Deputy Mayor Taylor to take part in the statutory public meetings.
All right, thank you, Mayor Post. So my plan here is to outline the procedures that are going to be followed tonight for the statutory meeting. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter is to call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 258-091-071. #. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to the clerk's department at orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2242 and reference Parks and Events bylaw. Note that any information collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, David McKay from MHBC Planning. David, you're on the line, sir?
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor.
Okay, I'll turn the evening over to yourself for your presentation.
Thank you very much. And I'll just share my screen. Presentation. Let me, everyone see that? Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of council. My name is David McKay. I'm a registered professional planner with MHBC Planning. I'm here to represent the rezoning application for 515 Broadway. I want to make sure I can see everybody as shown on the screen here. The proposal tonight is for a rezoning application to seek clarifications in the existing zoning bylaw that was approved by council in November 2020. At the time, there was a proposal for a long-term care facility / retirement home, as well as for townhouses. Unfortunately, over the last number of years and leading up to November 2020, we were working with the Conservation Authority on the subject lands. Those discussions have continued, and as I'll show later on the slide, the adjacent environmental areas basically have grown. We are protecting them and naturalizing them as part of the proposal. And that's led to the long-term care facility with all of its various amenities not being able to fit on the subject lands as originally contemplated. And to that extent, my client still does have the award for the long-term care facility for Orangeville, and he is going to be working with the town to find a new location for that facility. So with respect to the application tonight, the application is to permit effectively a common elements condominium. There is no change to the land use, the height or density from the original proposal. It's really clarifying that common elements condominium townhouse development can occur on the subject lands. As shown on this context map, the lands are north of Broadway, next to the Shoppers Drug Mart Plaza, that's to the east. You can see that a large portion of the property is green in terms of environmental open space, and that is to remain as part of the proposal. And similarly, that's carried forward into the official plan in terms of land use. And as I'd mentioned, the site was redesignated to allow for high-density residential uses in the 2020 applications, and that is remaining in effect. Similarly, it was rezoned to a site-specific zoning on RM2 with site-specific permission 224. You can also see on this map, the zoning map, that the environmental components were rezoned OS2 at that point in time as part of that application. So as I'd mentioned, the previous approval was for a retirement facility, long-term care. At the time, we were looking at keeping the on-stream pond as part of that proposal within the environmental features. And so that area has now been revised through extensive discussions with the Conservation Authority to remove that man-made pond from the on-line system, to naturalize it as in this configuration on the site plan, and obviously incorporate the various environmental features and buffers that are required for that facility. That leaves a portion of the lands that were developable, but not enough, as I said, for the retirement facility. So our client has changed directions and is just going with a condominium development. Same access point as proposed, using the same easements, utilizing the same various servicing capacities that were contemplated previously. So again, no significant changes in terms of outside of the form of the development is occurring. And as I said, we are, in terms of the similarities, as I said, the access point was approved and it remains in place. We do still have townhouses that were on the eastern portion of the site, and really, it's really this portion that I'm circling that has changed in terms of the long-term care facility / retirement home to townhouses. So we have proposed a draft plan of subdivision that is part of this application that will set up the residential block and the open space block that continues. And as I mentioned, we're looking at a variety of different townhomes, different types of colors and materials that are being proposed, and we'll work with staff on the various different types of elevation treatment to provide a community within this area that will be fit within the neighborhood and will be make the town proud. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have and to respond to any questions of the public. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mackay. My apologies for mispronouncing your name earlier.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to invite questions or comments from the public regarding the matter. If any member of the public is connecting via telephone, is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. And is there anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this issue at this time? No? Okay. Seeing and hearing none. There's a hand up. Oh, thank you. Okay. Want to unmute yourself online, Patrick?
Oh.
Mr. White?
No, yep. Hi. Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Ms. White.
Hello?
Very good.
You can hear me?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
please, go
sorry,
ahead.
my camera's not working. Now that I've heard the proposal, a lot of the questions have been answered. I'm really pleased to hear. I know it's interfered with the developer's plan originally, but just as someone who lives in that area, and there's the water retention pond that's right behind Shoppers, that area is, I have to commend the town because it's a really beautiful place that feels quite natural in town. And anything to sort of preserve our like wildlife corridors is something that I hope we really take into consideration whenever we do look at development. So knowing that a lot of that's not going to be, I was concerned that there was going to be a lot of those trees removed in sort of deforestation. So a lot of my questions have been answered.
Very good. Thank you. Okay, so council, any questions from council? Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, so through you, Chair Taylor. I'm actually going to hold off on my questions because I'd like the staff report to be brought forward because a lot of my questions will be linked with the staff report as well.
So my understanding, are you having a presentation? I don't think so, right? No? Clerk?
I could speak to that if that's all right. So given that the applicant did the presentation outlining the terms of the application, staff have put a report on the agenda for your prior information. So should you have any questions for staff based on the presentation and on the report, then that's fine. But staff don't have a subsequent second PowerPoint presentation.
Very good. Does that change your mind, Councillor Sherwood?
I can go for it.
Excellent. Okay. The floor is yours.
And I'm sorry, did I jump ship on? Okay, all right. Number one, I'm very disappointed about the retirement lodge being pulled out of this development because I've actually been telling people there was going to be something there. So, and I hope that the promises of the developer seeking to put that somewhere else is not just something that they're stating to in order to get this development come forward. I know that sounds a little strong-holded, but like I say, I'm very disappointed in that part. Secondly, there's mention of a parkette within the development, and I am hoping that that will include some kind of playground equipment for the children because there is no park for the children, and I would imagine that the demographics of that neighborhood will be young families. So I would hope that you really include some kind of slides or swings. That's just a kind of a comment I'm making. The other thing, I have to quickly go to the staff report because I'm not there. I'll come back if I could when I find that one.
Very good. And just before I go to you, Councillor Andrews, and just to make sure we've got this right, Janine Marie White, that's you on the phone under Patrick White? Is that correct? Just to make sure?
Yes, that is. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, okay, so we have covered that. I want to make sure that we didn't skip over you. Thank you very much. So I'll call on you, Councillor Andrews, if I could.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Good evening, and Mr. Mackay, I should say. I appreciate the honesty regarding the developer, regarding the long-term care facility. Very similar comment to Councillor Sherwood, with the hope that there is genuine interest, which seems to be displayed here in your comments tonight, for the developer to work with the town, and hopefully we can find another location that would be suitable. I am impressed by the renderings. I think that we are at a time where we see opportunities for people to move in with families, be that demographically. We definitely need some additional housing. Hopefully it can come online sooner than later. The one observation I made on the rendering, and hopefully either yourself or someone from staff might be able to provide some clarity. I am familiar with that location, and there is also an abutting property that has a driveway that goes north and south. And there seems to be two entrances. So for those of us that end up using the plaza, and then there's the adjacent property that has a very long driveway. As you've indicated, the access point to that location, will it be either configured closer towards, say, the Shoppers Drug Mart location, or is it going to remain where it is with the parallel driveway? And the reason why I'm pointing this out, as was highlighted by Councillor Sherwood, we are going to get some young families moving in there, and I'm wondering where that entrance point will be, because subsequently with young children, they may be school aged. a bus route will be there. I'm trying to figure out all of that out. So either someone might be able to provide some clarity to that particular question.
Okay, I don't know if staff will respond to that, but I can, sir. And so perhaps I can just share my screen again. That's probably the easiest thing. Can you see my screen again? Okay, so 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 the two questions. One was about a play area, and we are contemplating a play area at the kind of south end of the area adjacent to the environmental area for children. So we have incorporated that into the design of the proposal. Relative to the access point, there is an easement that covers this property. The intent is to provide for the access point to cross that driveway and utilize the shopper's entrance that's just off the screen here. That's the intent, and that aligns with the C-line intersection.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, if I'm just follow up, Chair Taylor, if I'm hearing you correctly, then that the collaboration is with the property owner, I would hope, because there will be some wear and tear. I know that driveway is gravel, and then the other portion of that plaza is paved. And in most cases, most individuals would be exiting into that intersection so they can come and go because of the traffic lights that are there. But I know others that may end up using it as a shortcut to proceed, be that on a westerly direction. So I would just hope that there's some collaboration with the property owner, and I would assume that also falls under the jurisdiction of that current property owner. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my understanding, sir, is that there is an easement in favor of my client over the driveway, and they've coordinated in terms of the entrance with the adjacent property owners, and that will include the maintenance and other items that goes along with it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Ward, did you want to offer anything further, or do you think we got that?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Nothing further to add. There is a holding symbol restriction that would remain on the property through this application that requires the applicant to demonstrate satisfactory access arrangements to our satisfaction as a prerequisite to lift that restriction.
Very good. Councillor McIntosh, did you want to comment?
Thank you very much, Chair Taylor. I just want to comment. I have no issue with the building, other than the design, other than it's been discussed here. I just find it very sad that the Credit Valley Conservation Area is stopping something that this town badly needs. I think it's quite frankly disgusting. This is something that was needed in this town, the long-term care home that we were working on. I think it's just a sad state of affairs when this Ontario government agency steps in and basically put a stops to it. So just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I had a question for the town, and just thinking about safety of children. I'm delighted to see that there are sidewalks promoting walkability. I foresee children and families walking over to the Shoppers Drug Mart Plaza, and I'm wondering if we can look into a crosswalk or something where people can safely traverse over to the plaza.
Mr. Ward, did you want to take that one?
Sure, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That's something we can certainly look at as part of this going forward. It perhaps is something more of a site design item as opposed to a land use change item, but we'll certainly take that back with the applicant.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ward. All good, Councillor Prendergast?
Yes.
Very good. Councillor Sherwood, did you want to?
Yes, through you, Chair Taylor, to Mr. Ward. I'm referring back into your report, and specifically, I'm looking at all the regulations and the requirements within the zoning bylaw and things that are put forward towards the site specific. I'm seeing this more and more coming before council, where site specifics don't always seem to comply with our regulations. And in this particular development, and again, please, I am not anti-development here. We need housing, but this particular one does not comply to one of those requirements. And as a staff, I would assume you and your senior planner go through all of these specs before they come before us. And I'm just wondering, what can we do to make these developers, when they come forward with these applications, make us make them fulfill the requirement that our zoning bylaw is asking for them to do? Because there's just some significant differences here.
Mr. Ward?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and through you, this is part of the application submission process. We often do see these types of submissions coming forward whereby they request special provisions, sort of difference or deviance from the parent bylaw. And the reason, quite frankly, is that you now have a specific development product you're contemplating, and you are seeking special exemption for that. And often what you get is sort of what's called sometimes shrink wrapping. We don't like to be that specific to the built product, but what it does often result in is some substantial deviations from those performance standards that kind of prevail in the parent zone category. We do look at that with respect to, is that an appropriate built form product? Are those setbacks appropriate? You know, is there still an appropriate yard amenity space? Is there, I'm saying appropriate a lot because these are sort of the tests we look at. Is there a reasonable setback between buildings and things like that? And with this particular item, yes, there are some, I would say perhaps more significant changes, but that of course is something we look at as in terms of the appropriateness. That's really all the answer I have.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Okay, Councillor Sherwood. Mr. Osmond, did you want to speak to that?
Thank you, Chair Taylor. Just an observation and putting on my recreation hat for a second. Just want to remind the public and council as well, of course, that this site is providing access to the trail system, our main corridor. We call it Veterans Way. That particular corridor connects to the north of this development. And from a safety perspective as well, Councillor Prendergast, it also provides the an opportunity for people to go to the north and take the trail all the way down, come around to the rear of all the access points to the rear of Shoppers, if you would, or further down. And so it is located really well in terms of how it connects, and it's pretty important to us in terms of making that connectivity in the terms of the overall trail system. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else from council like to speak on this? Madam Mayor, it feels funny you not. No? Very good. Okay. Councillor Sherwood, please.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I'm chirping in here a lot. Can I just get clarification about the 2 parking spots? Is that one in the driveway and one in the garage? Or is there 2 outside parking?
Mr. Ward?
Again, to you, Deputy Mayor, it would be one maybe provided for in the garage, provided that it meets the dimension requirements, and the other may be in the driveway, again, subject to meeting the minimum space dimensions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Councillor Stevens from online. Welcome.
Thank you. And sorry I'm not in attendance tonight. I echo my fellow councillor at the table there. I'm a little concerned that the late change, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Okay. Do we get through? Anybody else speak to it? Mr. Osmond, your hand is still up. Did you want to speak? Okay. Yeah, and Ms. White, did you want to say something further? Your hand is up.
Sorry, and then I'll be quiet. I know
Okay,
I'm a little
certainly.
bit of a broken record, but as someone who has been really studying a tremendous amount of like the effects of biodiversity loss and its public health effects, I just really urge the new councillors to please not just stomp on, what the conservation authorities are saying. Like, there are serious ramifications of just all the biodiversity loss and selecting for, adaptable species who are more likely to transmit diseases to us. So I just hope that for future developments, we don't start increasingly disregarding it in favor strictly of development. I understand we need development, but just please, just thinking of the long-term effects of, that's just stuff that you destroy and you can't just get it back. So that's all I have to say.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. White. Okay, if there's no further discussion at this time, we will go to a motion, and the motion is written in the agenda, that report INS 2023-009, 515 Broadway, Public Meeting Information Report, RZ 2022-04, be received by council as information at the public meeting on February 13th, 2023. Could I have a motion, please? Mayor Post? Councillor McIntosh? All in favor? Yes. Okay, so that passes. Thank you very much, everyone. And that brings us on to item 9.3. And given that it's a secondary subject and we actually have a third on here again, there is procedures that we must follow, so bear with me. I'd like to ask anyone that would like to speak on this matter to call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 258-091-071 #. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. And anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2242. And as referenced by the Parks and Events bylaw, note that any information collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, I would like to call on Melanie Visser from MHBC Planning, and I'll turn the meeting over to you. Welcome.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me here today. My name is Melissa Visser from MHBC Planning, and I am a planner at our firm. I'm here today with Dan Curry, a partner at MHBC, and the landowners, Ava and Scott Cowell, who are sitting here as well today. So the purpose of me being here today is to give you an overview of our proposed rezoning and severance of the property located at 330 Blind Line. And the proposal is to rezone it from a development holding zone to a residential zone. If you can. So the property is located in the built-up area of Orangeville, surrounded by low-density residential. There's a school across the street as well, and park. It's located in proximity to transit and trails as well. Okay. The property contains a two-story heritage dwelling, so it's designated under the Ontario Heritage Act. And the proposal is to retain the heritage building on the retained lands and to sever a portion of the property for the development of a new single detached residential building. We've shown here the new lot will be 15 meters in width, which is about 50 feet. And it's 43 meters in depth, so it's a 140-foot depth lot. On our picture there, we have shown a road winding. So on Blind Line, we were advised during our pre-consultation that the road is planned to be widened. So as part of the future severance application, a 5-meter road widening would be given to the town. You can go next slide. The subject lands are designated low density residential, permitting single detached dwellings, and the proposed rezoning would implement the official plan designation that exists on the property. The proposed rezoning and severance would contribute to the town's intensification targets, and it would be a gentle intensification of the site. You go next slide. As I said, the property is zoned development holding, and this holding zone is implemented to make sure that servicing is secured on the site for any future development. So this is why we need to rezone the property to a residential zone to then permit the severance. So what we are proposing on the retained lands is site-specific regulations to recognize the existing location of the building. And on the severed property, we would ask for no site-specific provisions. So we would meet all of the regulations of the zoning bylaw for a residential second density. Okay. So as part of our application, we completed a planning justification report, heritage impact assessment. We completed functional servicing report, including low impact development. The property is located in a source water protection area. So the low impact development report was completed to make sure that any future development could maintain groundwater recharge rates pre and post development. And that's everything I have for you today, and I'm available for questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Visser. So at this time, I'd like to invite questions or comments from the public regarding the matter. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 and to mute and unmute. And if there's anyone in the gallery that would like to speak to this, you're welcome to do so at this time. Okay, seeing and hearing none. At this time, I'd like to invite Christina Hambley to attend the delegations table and speak to items 9.6. Christina Hambley, on behalf of Patsy Swanson, 330 Blind Line, RZ 2022-03, and 9.7, Christina Hambley on behalf of Brian Hambley, 330 Blind Line, RZ-2022-03.
Thank you. Good evening. Mayor Post, Deputy Mayor Taylor, distinguished members of council. My name is Christina Hambley. I reside at 444 Scott Drive here in Orangeville. I'll be reading 2 letters to you tonight, as was said by Chair Taylor. One from my neighbor Patsy Swanson, who is not able to be here tonight, and a second letter is from my husband Brian Hambley. I will read Ms. Swanson's letter first. I've been fortunate to be a homeowner on Scott Drive in beautiful Orangeville for over 25 years and have enjoyed the transformation of this town while watching it maintain its small town charm and character. Something I hope to continue to experience over many years to come. Like all of us who have resided here, we've seen our share of growth and densification, which is a requirement and expected in our fair town and across Ontario. I'm writing to you today having received notice of file number RZ-2202-03. While I feel badly for many residents getting into the market at the peak and having perhaps overpaid for the property, I feel there are a couple of issues surrounding this application that I wish to bring to council's attention. My primary concern is safety. Blind Line, which really should be called School Road, is filled daily with the hustle and bustle of school kids. Up and down the road, people walking dogs or out for exercise. The craziness of vehicles up and down the road is unbelievable. From frantic parents dropping kids off for school, blocking side streets and stopping along Blind Line itself, having vehicles double parked, pulling their way around each other, having vehicles frantically spinning up and down the road, and not to mention our amazing emergency service folks using that route to help residents out. The road is a very busy one and is configured as such that I can't see it being widened in the near term. I personally thanked OPP and OPS prior for sitting off to the side of Blind Line, slowing down traffic and catching the occasional passerby who is going too fast. While it's posted at a 40-kilometer zone, very rarely does anyone do the speed limit as experienced when walking or seeing the rates flashing on the posted sign just north of the ambulance station. I've also called the principal at St. Benedict's School on occasion to ask them to pass a message to parents to please slow down, relax a bit, and try to put the kid and not put the kids' safety at risk, as I know others are going to be hurt on this stretch of road. I've seen accidents happen along our stretch, including almost losing a neighbor while out enjoying a bike ride along Blind Line brushed by a car. While it was several years ago, he is still recovering, and again, we are lucky to still have him with us. After almost being killed with the wild drivers along this road, Council McIntosh was interviewed in the Banner about speed and issues on the road after this incident. And this Banner article was in August of 2020. It was entitled "Somebody's Going to Get Hit." Orangeville resident wants photo radar after a neighborhood hit on bicycle. I know the road is not going to lighten and load once Handsome opens up. However, at least it's intersecting at a streetlight, which should allow a better flow and safer passage for pedestrians. My issue with this file and safety is the location of the proposed build and how it will flow to Blind Line. Right at the section of the school madness, morning and night, along with cars entering and exiting at a spot where vehicles are often picking up speed. It is going to potentially put others at risk, and worst case, a child. My other concern is the source water protection area with the vulnerability score of 10, with significant threat activities listed. WHPA-A, B and E, wellhead protection area, A, B, and E are crucial for all the community to protect as it's directly connected to our drinking water. With road salt application, reduced groundwater recharge, legacy sewage issues at the subject land, a build in this location could potentially put the water protection area at further risk. Water protection is critical, and we need to do all we can to protect it for ourselves and generations that come after us. Deputy Mayor, and Council, I would ask you please consider all comments received on this file. I would encourage you to experience the madness of Blind Line firsthand and the speed of vehicles wildly flying by. The careless nature faced, and evaluate what a new driveway into the middle of this might bring, especially after Hanson opens and more traffic ensues. I would further ask for an environmental study to be explored for this potential bill, squeezed in between a heritage house and a protected water area, as again, water is life and we need to protect this. Thank you for your time and consideration of my thoughts and concerns. Patsy Swanson, 443 Scott Drive. Mayor Post, Deputy Mayor Taylor, and members of council. I'm writing this letter in concerns to file number RZ-2022-03 of the proposed bill beside the Heritage House located at 330 Blind Line in Orangeville. Number one being safety. The ability of this section of Blind Line to safely accommodate another vehicular exit and entrance on school days. The hill can be backed up with vehicles trying to enter and exit St. Benedict's Catholic Elementary School. Parents also park on Scott Drive and walk their children the short distance uphill to the school. I've wondered if they find this a lot easier and safer than bothering with Blind Line Hill by car when it is busy to get to the school. I'm fairly familiar with Blind Line Hill as I cycled it for a number of years, leaving and returning to my home on Scott Drive. In August 2019, I failed to return from my regular cycling route. The only clear memory of my cycling accident on Blind Line Hill is a black vehicle mirror. I remember this most impactfully several days later as my wife pulled us into our Scott Drive residence upon my return from Sunnybrook Hospital. The accident's a mystery beyond that as far as I know to date. My injuries were significant enough to suffer many broken bones and a TBI through a split bicycle helmet resulting from this accident. My bike helmet saved my life, for which I am thankful. With the school, Town Wells, the Dufferin Ambulance Station, and the Credit Valley Conservation Area as neighbors, I'm concerned about adding another driveway to this narrow strip of road I call Blind Line Hill. Another residential build approved at the location proposed might not be a safe bet. The road has always been very narrow from the bridge next to the ambulance station to the top of the Blind Line Hill. I believe this hilly section of road is already maxed with intersect points already without adding another. For motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians alike, it is a tricky piece of road to be on. Thank you very much. Brian Hambley, 444 Scott Drive. I'd also just like to read a little post that was posted on Facebook the day after my husband's accident. And it actually was posted by the gentleman who used to live at 330 Blind Line. Yesterday afternoon, between 4:30 and 5, a cyclist was severely injured while riding south on Blind Line, just north of St. Benedict School. Although not hit by a vehicle, which was also driving south, the vehicle passed the rider on a hill and so closely to him that the rider was startled, lost his balance, and was thrown from his bike, severely damaging his head. This is also a 40-kilometer speed zone with a radar sign telling you how fast you are going. 911 was called and all the emergency first responders attended, and the rider was sent to the hospital very quickly. Having lived on the Blind Line near this intersect for 20 years, I continue to see speeders on this section. In fact, I would say most people do speed. Even worse, they pass other vehicles on a solid line because they are impatient. There are 3 elementary schools on or near the Blind Line. There are many children, adults, and animals that walk daily along the street. There are also many cyclists who enjoy its rolling hills. Stop speeding and think of others before someone else gets hurt or killed. I want to commend the OPS, ambulance medics, and firefighters who promptly attended to the scene and took care of the injured in their usual professional manner. Same to the 911 dispatcher who calmly dealt with the caller. OPS, is it possible to increase patrols in this area? I realize that your resources are thin and that there are many speeders elsewhere, but I would suggest that with school starting the following week, that this would be a priority to you. Members of council, what can you do to deter these infractions? Stop signs, speed bumps, photo radar. Please, we need to have something done. Thank you for your time.
Good, thank you, Christina. I see why those people wanted you to be the orator tonight. You're a very good reader, thank you. And if I may too, I know Brian Hambley well. I've spent a lot of time talking to him. He's a wonderful man. I'm so glad that he is recovering, and what a great letter from him too. So thank you for that. So if I could, at this time, I'd like to invite questions from council on this matter. Mayor Post.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Taylor. We've just heard some comments about the safety of that stretch of Blind Line, and my question, I guess, would be probably through to Mr. Ward. Is there any traffic study required for this type of severance where we are adding an additional entrance off of an already kind of busy area? And second to that is, when it comes, I think it's going to be a little less once the house is actually constructed, but when it comes to construction vehicles and the time that the build is happening, is there any consideration that needs to be taken to ensure that that area is protected and that we don't have any traffic issues during the construction time?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I'll try to answer the first question with respect to the traffic study. I might ask Ms. Russell to jump in if she has anything further to add, just with her carriage of the file. But for this sort of situation, we look at the existing permissions, and it is a development zone. So that development zone does indeed highlight some intention for some sort of development to happen in the future. The question of what obviously needs to come forward through an amendment approval. So it's important to take that recognition into consideration when looking at this. Now, to answer the question specifically about the traffic study, we look at, well, what is exactly happening here and how does that differ or relate to what the existing conditions are? So we look at the existing characteristics of the road and the traffic activity, as well as in tandem with, well, what is happening? Are we introducing a development of many, many units, or is it just one? And in this case, it's one unit, it's one additional driveway. So the change in really relative to existing is seen to be quite minor in comparison to that existing condition. So I don't believe we did ask for a traffic study with this, given the magnitude of the development happening and the entrance. Now, having said that, the entrance location is something staff would look at as part of the siting of the lot once that comes through its application process and the eventual building permit. There's preference to try to align that driveway entrance with another if it's sort of situated across from each other. But again, that's a more finite siting exercise than it is a land use decision matter.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Did you have something further? No? Any other members of council? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair Taylor, and Your Worship, thank you for asking that question as for a traffic study. That particular area is just literally northwest of my neighborhood, and having had my son attend St. Ben's Elementary, I know the intensity of traffic in that area on a daily basis. I'm also glad that Mr. Ward provided some clarity, because the clarity that I was looking for was in fact the location of the driveway in proximity to, say, Scott Drive. I understand that we're looking at one particular property on this lot, the severance of it. I'm not sure if in this particular meeting, if this answer can be provided to the question. The property owners are requesting this to be severed. Are the property owners also going to be the potential developer of that severed property, or would be sold off for someone else to follow specific guidelines as per required by the town?
Mr. Ward?
That's you, Deputy Mayor. I'm not certain whether they would indeed pursue the actual building development or whether or not they would sell to another party. Having said that, we look at the severance, and the severance application has a little more opportunity within it to impose certain conditions if they are desirable and appropriate for that actual lot creation, to deal with certain matters that might be pertinent to the actual unit coming to fruition. That could be entered in through an agreement that would be registered on the title through that consent process, and that agreement would be binding on the property, so it would be successional upon any future purchaser of the land should they choose to develop it or hand it off to somebody else to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Mr. Chair, may I continue? As was referenced, the idea to widen line at some point. Would that also include a sidewalk on the west side of that artery?
Mr. Ward?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, I don't believe the widening is to facilitate an immediate physical reconstruction or widening of that road at this time. It really is to accommodate the actual right-of-way width, so the actual land that we own in that corridor. This property it's historic. The other properties around it, as they've developed over time, we've acquired additional land to widen out that roadway width, and this is sort of a remnant that is still more narrower at that location. So this is now the opportunity for us to acquire the additional land to kind of make that right-of-way width a little more linear along its corridor, to indeed facilitate some sort of future reconstruction process in the future if and when the town ever wishes to pursue that.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
I just wanted to follow up on this, if you don't mind, because I know the area well. Thank you,
Yes.
Chair Taylor. While it happens to be a point of discussion, and it may be something for us to consider at some point, but it has certainly been brought to our attention by many of those who are concerned. It is a very busy artery, and it does have some impediments in it, is from a traffic perspective, and I'm not a traffic expert, but I think that something for us to at least consider as we move down the line on any form of reconstruction of that area, to implement or at least consider some form of traffic mitigation. I know that we do have the radar signs on the south and north side, but it is a busy artery 7 days a week. And so just something to take note of. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Prendergast, did you want to speak?
Thank you. I have two questions/comments. The proposed frontage is 50 feet. And just doing a quick calculation, the driveway would be about 19.5 feet wide. Quick Google search tells me that a 2-car driveway is 20 to 24 feet wide. My concerns would be this becoming a single property home with one family living in it, then it being converted to a basement property and a family living upstairs and not having adequate parking. Would a circular driveway be a possibility? And the second was the Ontario Heritage Act designation. Unfortunately, doesn't apply to trees on the property. So we're looking at the removal of 13 to 15 mature trees that contribute to our tree canopy in town. What provisions would be made to make sure we have trees that are not maybe saplings, but spaded in trees to regenerate that loss of tree canopy? Thank you.
Mr. Ward or Ms. Visser, did you want to speak to that? Mr. Ward?
Your Deputy Mayor, I'll speak to the second question around trees if I could. That is certainly something we could explore further, is sort of a compensation planting approach. You're correct. Under the heritage framework applicable to the site, the bylaw does not identify the trees as among the heritage features, so it doesn't really gain additional protections there. But as this goes forward, that's something we could evaluate is the removal and an appropriate compensation replacing. Now, with the compensation replanting, we appreciate that we perhaps would not want to see small saplings, but at the same time, we have to recognize that there's a certain degree that you have to operate within in terms of replanting trees. There's maybe some challenges with bringing in larger trees because their survival rates are a little more hampered because of their maturity. So, but at the same time, we don't want to plant small seeds and hope for the best. I would suggest we'd probably look at our prevailing development standards for the appropriate tree size that might be a suitable candidate for compensation planting here.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Ms. Visser, did you want to speak to the round driveway?
Thank you. Regarding the driveway, the development hasn't been designed yet. So the building hasn't been designed either. And what we showed was just a building envelope of the max building that would be permitted by the zoning regulations. So the driveway design could be completed at the time of building permit when that would come through. And that would have to meet the zoning as well.
Very good. You good? Okay. Council, any further questions? Okay. Seeing none, at this time, we'll proceed with the motion as written in the agenda, and that is that the report INS-2023-008 330 Blind Line Public Meeting Information Report RZ-2022-03 be received by council as information at the public meeting on February 13th, 2023. Could I have a motion for that, please? Councillor McIntosh, second, Councillor Pendergast, all in favor? Yes, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And so that brings us to item 10. And again, I will outline the procedures that will follow on this public meeting. And that is that anyone who would like to speak on this matter is to call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 258-091-071 #. Callers will be invited to provide their questions or comments following the conclusion of the meeting presentation. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Anyone who wants to be notified of further consideration of this topic to submit their name, phone number, mailing address, and email address to clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca or call 519-941-0440 extension 2242 and reference Parks and Events bylaw. Note that any information collected is a matter of public record. So at this time, I'll call on our acting general manager, Karen Landry of Corporate Services, to present to us. Ms. Landry?
Thank you. I'm just getting the bylaw up on my screen in advance of the time for questions. Just give me a moment. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mona. And just for members of council and the public, I do have actually a full team with me here this evening. I've got Sharon and Charles and who else is here? Oh, Dwight as well. And Ruth, I believe, is on the line. So thank you. They're going to assist me with any questions, but I'm here to present to you just the draft bylaw. Next slide, please. So our actual schedule with respect to bringing this bylaw forward to council is we have the public meeting tonight to take all public input, both from the public and from members of council. It's anticipated we will gather and summarize all that feedback and report to council on March the 20th. And make any changes based on that feedback and present it to council at that time with a planned implementation date of April 1st. Next slide, please. So this particular bylaw really what this bylaw has done is it's actually taken a few bylaws that we currently have in place as it relates to the regulation and use of parks. It's also captured a few policies that we currently have in place and incorporated them into the bylaw. It's gone further than that in terms of I guess, solidifying or presenting to council the various regulations that we currently practice and put them in the bylaw to put in a format that is understood by all of the public and that is enforceable should the need arise. So again, it touches upon all the permitted uses and activities within a park. It prohibits certain activities, which I think I want to draw to your attention, specifically with respect to the use of remotely piloted aircraft, so drones, camping or lodging in a park, and also with respect to the scattering of remains from cremation in a park. And we have had a few inquiries over I would say the last couple of years as it relates to the scattering of remains. And municipality, if they're going to prohibit that particular activity on town lands or in a park, has to do so within a bylaw. It introduces actually something new, but I know it will take some time to implement, right, Sharon? Designating certain parks that we will permit barbecuing in. However, those areas will need to be defined and those parks will need to be defined before someone can apply for a permit to have that type of activity take place in those designated parks. It continues with the requirement to obtain a permit with respect to the exclusive use of a town facility. And for example, I'll give you as a soccer field rental. It establishes the requirements to obtain a special event permit that's going to be conducted on town lands. Previously, the town was pretty much using the temporary highway closure process for permitting special events. This now incorporates all the different application requirements in terms of conditions of a permit if you're going to hold a special event in the town and on town lands. It introduces, and I know Ruth is on the line, it introduces a framework for dealing with film production permits on town lands, but it goes beyond just dealing with film productions on town lands. It also deals with film productions on private lands where there is the use of special effects, special effect pyrotechnics, or fireworks. It updates all the application requirements with respect to a facility use permit, and introduces all the application requirements for a special event and film production. Next slide, please. And for all those types of permits, it establishes all the different terms and conditions. And I think one thing I want to stress here is when staff worked on this particular bylaw, we took the effort, or made the effort, I should say, to ensure that the terms and conditions across all the different permit types were worded in a similar fashion so that it was understood that if there was a certain term and condition in a special event permit and there was that same type of term and condition in a facility use permit, the wording is the same. And we standardized all those different types of terms and conditions across the permit types. It gives delegated authority to the General Manager of Community Services to manage, control, regulate, maintain, and develop parks, post signs, and issue permits. And what this bylaw also does is it incorporates provisions with respect to removal of an article or object on town lands where it hasn't been permitted to be placed there in the first place. So it sets up that framework and establishes the notification requirements to that particular, I'm going to say, object or article owner. And similar to all our other regulatory bylaws, it establishes the enforcement and penalty provisions that are standard across the bylaws that have already come forward before council. So for example, towing has been one that's been before you recently, vehicle for hire. So those enforcement and penalty provisions start to look, not just start to look, but are actually the same in terms of how we go about enforcing. Next slide, please. And the one after that, Mona, thank you. So to go over some of the application requirements, I'm not going to read them and you'll see them on the screen. What I do want to note is these are application requirements that don't necessarily apply to every type of every application that comes forward. What staff will do is they will assess the actual application and then determine what needs to be submitted as part of that application process. But what we did here was we identified all the potential types of requirements that may need to be met as when you apply for that type of permit. So for example, with a special event permit, we're looking at any site plan, which I'm assuming in every case would be a requirement to be submitted. But depending on the size and the types of activities that are taking place at that particular special event, different documentation or plans may need to be submitted, such as a security plan, a waste management plan. I do want to draw your attention perhaps to the final bullet on this particular screen, which deals with the applicant providing written details as it relates to certain activities that are taking place. Because I know that when the report came forward to council to send this to a public meeting, there was some discussion on certain types of activities, which included fireworks. So this particular process for a special event permit will permit, if they obtain a permit and meet all the established criteria, fireworks to be displayed on public property, so on town lands. And there's a slide further on that I'll speak to the differences, and I know I have Dwight here with me this evening to speak to the differences between what this bylaw does or proposes to do and the actual fireworks bylaw itself that we currently have in place. But there is one other item in here in this particular bullet that I just want to point out, because actually I think we had a discussion not too long ago about snakes. I think that's been raised with respect to the town's current animal control bylaw, which doesn't permit snakes in the town. What this bylaw does propose to do, though, is subject to a special event permit, there could be exotic animals that could be brought in as part of that actual special event. Next slide, please. Again, the several different requirements that I will mention as part of a special event. I'll just point out the Technical Standards and Safety Authority certification for each amusement device. And that's only obviously a requirement if they're bringing in those amusement devices themselves. We've also, I think the other thing I want to point out is there was a lot of work done, and I know Dwight was involved in terms of getting some assistance from the federal government as a resource for the special effect pyrotechnics. So those provisions have been included in the bylaw, and we've actually included the different classification of the pyrotechnics as a schedule to the bylaw. The town, currently as part of the temporary highway closures, when they were done in conjunction with a special event, did require the submission of insurance, but this just I guess, expands on those insurance requirements based on the activities that are taking place. It sets a minimum for the type of insurance and the amount of insurance that is to be submitted, but it also gives staff the ability, based on the activities, to adjust that amount to a higher amount if need be. Next slide, please. So the bylaw, in essence, there's all these application requirements that we put forward, and some of those application requirements naturally turn into terms and conditions of a permit. So for example, if you're required to submit insurance as part of the application process, a term and condition of that would be is that you have to maintain that insurance in full effect during the actual event itself. It requires that there be compliance with all the plan submission documents. So if there was a security plan that was submitted as part of this application process, the expectation is that you're going to adhere to that particular security plan because the town approved that permit based on that document being submitted. It requires, again, the removal of waste or refuse within a certain period of time of the special event. The details with respect to all the various terms and conditions of a permit are outlined on actual Schedule B of the bylaw. Currently, the town has included that the events can't take place between 11 p.m. one day and 7 a.m. the following day. We've carried forward that practice and have indicated, though, that if the general manager receives a request to operate the event past those hours, it would be subject to their approval. One of the areas that I think of that may be of particular interest to members of council and the BIA, you may recall that as part of, I guess, the policy that we had for temporary highway closures, there was a notification process to the BIA if the event was taking place within the BIA and the BIA was not the host of that particular event. We've carried that forward. We've actually incorporated minimum notification requirements in this case so that they have sufficient time to provide any comment. The other thing that we've also done is that we've clarified the process as it relates to when a special event involves a temporary highway closure and it hasn't been an event that has taken place over the last 2 consecutive years annually, that there will be notification to those individual residents that will be impacted by that special event occurring, so that there is the opportunity for them to provide feedback. Next slide, thank you. The next, so that's special events. So we also included film production permit application requirements in this bylaw because as we were developing the bylaw, Ruth came forward and thought that it would be a good idea to actually incorporate the film production piece into this bylaw as well. So as part of that, again, Ruth would be checking for, or another staff member will be looking to see that they have the actual parks and facility use permit from Sharon to be in a park or facility, if that was the case. There are occasions where, as part of a film production, there are the use of special effect pyrotechnics or special effects. So again, they have to submit that similar type of documentation as you would for a special event. There may be the need for paid duty police or fire personnel to be present based on the activities that are taking place as part of that film production. Again, a site plan, same parameters apply as it relates to insurance, again, based on the activities that are taking place as part of that film production. The requests and the type of insurance required is dependent on those activities. And in this particular case, there is staff will require that the applicant provide proof of notification to all landowners within a 60-meter radius. Next slide, please. The terms and conditions, again, are similar as to what it would be for a special event in terms of complying with all submission documents that were filed as part of the application. The details of more specific terms and conditions are on Schedule D of the bylaw. Similar here, the hours that which a film production can occur, 11 p.m. to one day to 7 a.m. the following day, unless otherwise approved. And intermittent traffic stoppages can't exceed 5 minutes. Next slide, please. This is the fireworks slide. So on the right-hand side, you're going to see the provisions as it relates to our current fireworks bylaw. I'll go over them in terms of summary. I'm not going to read them as they appear on the screen, but essentially, the setting off of fireworks is not permitted on town property, period. When fireworks are permitted on private property, there are those further restrictions that you see listed here within the limits of a shopping plaza. They can't be within 183 meters of a nursing home, etc. They also can only be set off during certain periods of time of the year, being Canada Day and Victoria Day, and the day immediately preceding or following those particular dates. Any special day that's actually established by council is provided for in the bylaw. And on a date that's approved by the issuing of a permit, which would be through fire. As part of that application process, right now the town requires the site plan and insurance to be provided. This bylaw proposes to allow the setting off of fireworks on town lands subject to a permit. And the date that the fireworks could be set off would be set out in the actual permit. It includes provisions to ask for and require the submission of certain documents, specific insurance, and certifications based on the type of fireworks that are proposed to be displayed. And that would be, I like to call them low hazard versus high hazard, but I know it's more commonly called display or consumer fireworks. So that's the difference. The current bylaw doesn't permit them on town lands. This proposes to permit them on town lands subject to a permit and meeting all the requirements of the bylaw. Next slide, please. And I did do this. Next slide. Thank you. Last but not least, right, Sharon, is the actual parks and facility use permit application requirements. Again, similar provisions across all permits. A few things that might be different here. Well, actually not different, but that I haven't mentioned in the previous slides as it relates to a liquor license or special occasion permit, which would also apply to a special event potentially. Again, we're looking for if there is going to be the use of special effect pyrotechnics, they have to submit the documentation in that regard. We again ask for potentially for paid duty police or security company or fire division staff to be present. And hopefully I will say it correctly, but it's the payment of the in tandem fees. Is that right, Sharon? And that's with respect to music licensing. I think it used to be SOCAN or SOCAN. Okay. Next slide, please. So one of the terms and conditions with respect to a parks and facility use permit is dealing with the fact that there has to be an actual inspection conducted before the use of the actual facility. Again, we deal with the actual removal of refuse prior to the expiry of the permit. There are different specific conditions as it relates, I think, is when it's a dressing room, as it relates to a hockey facility, like when someone's doing hockey, right, Sharon? We ask for them to vacate that particular area within a period of time after the expiry of the permit. That you can't permit gaming without a lottery license. And then all the other specific terms and conditions as it relates to a parks and facility use permit are outlined on Schedule F of the bylaw. Next slide, please. So that concludes a very general summary of the bylaw, because as I know council is aware, it's a very lengthy bylaw and has a lot of words in it. But this is in generalities. I think if I can stress anything, it formalizes our current practices and procedures. It incorporates a lot of different policies and bylaws that we currently have in place. And the main differences also relate to remotely piloted aircraft, the drones, the potential for exotic animals to be brought into the town as part of a special event permit, the special effect pyrotechnics matters in terms of how we will deal with that, and also the fireworks provisions. And now the team will help me respond to any questions that there may be.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. So at this time, I'll invite any questions or comments from the public regarding the matter. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute their phone. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this? Yes, sir. Mr. Ugolini.
Name and address?
Sure. I think I've got it memorized by now.
Oh, it's okay. I'll stand. Thanks. Rick Ugolini, 19 Cedar Drive, Orangeville. I have a question about fireworks. Now, it was my understanding, I talked to a couple of you about fireworks, and it was my belief that fireworks were going to be banned by homeowners here in town, just like Caledon did. And is it going to be looked at or what? I know 2 years ago, a neighbor had fireworks. He was out on the median And the next day I ended up on the roof of my house, and on my front lawn, I picked up a blue bag, newspaper bag full of remnants.
Ms. Lander, do you want to speak to that?
And 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, going off.
Okay. So I can advise as it relates to what we currently have in place, and fireworks can't be set up on public property. If there is a concern with respect to that, that can be reported to the town, and the town can investigate that. With respect to private property, there are provisions that do allow for certain types of fireworks to be displayed at certain times of year. This bylaw that we're dealing with right now proposes to expand and permit fireworks to be displayed on public lands. That all being said, there is a review of the actual fireworks bylaw that is scheduled for, and I know I'm going to look at Carolina, I think it was 2025, Carolina? Yes, 2025. So at that time, the town will review that bylaw in its entirety and take any public feedback as it relates to wanting to expand the ability to set off fireworks on public and private property, or whether we wanted to prohibit. But that would be part of that process in 2025. At this given time, I'm not aware of any movement to ban fireworks at this given juncture.
Thank you, Ms. Landry. Rick, does that satisfy?
It is what it is. My dog hates it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, I'll turn it to council, and Councillor Andrews, I think you're up first in the queue.
Thank you so much, Chair Taylor. Truly appreciate that. I also want to thank, first of all, Ms. Landry and all of those that were involved with this particular document. A lot of work, I can tell, has gone into it, and a lot of time has been taken to read it. So I do have a comment and a question, one of which is regarding special effects for film. And the special effects for film, because there's I guess a identifier regarding drones, and many film production companies are in fact using drones. And so will this particular bylaw require the film production company to identify that they have a licensed drone pilot? Or will that restrict that opportunity for them to utilize that type of device in their film production?
Karen, are you going to address that?
Yeah. Sure, Ruth, but you're there right behind me, right,
Yeah,
Ruth?
yeah, certainly.
Okay. So actually, it's a very good question because we did have a lot of back and forth discussion with respect to whether to permit or not to permit drones on public lands, and it does not permit them. And it, even as part of that actual permit process, and having discussions with Jason, who has a lot of expertise in this particular area, he advised us that there were very few areas within the town that it would be permitted in keeping with the federal regulations.
Okay, I don't want to open up a can of worms on this one, but I know that there is a specific profession within our community that also will end up using a production company to highlight visual attributes of property. Does this fall under that provision, or is that a completely different component altogether? I'm referencing the real estate.
Okay, thank you. So this gives an outright prohibition on town lands, period. I guess if council was wanting us to look at modifying what this bylaw currently proposes, we'll certainly take that direction and report back.
Yeah, as I'm zeroing on this, and Chair Taylor, I do have another part to this, but focusing on the drones, we have had a variety of town-led events. One that comes to mind, for example, the Blues Jazz Festival. Opportunities for different individuals who may end up having a drone during the Friday night activity. It may be behind Alexandra Park here. Will that be restricted or not? You know, looking for clarification on that.
This time it is, yes.
Okay.
And if it's to be introduced, if council wishes staff to look further into this, I can advise that we will need to consider where it would be permitted based on the regulations and complying with them. And then there are certain certifications based on, right, based on the size and based on where the drone is being flown. So certainly we are aware that those regulations exist. And if it's council's desire to have us look at that further, we will do so.
I'm very much aware of the licensing process, and I think that we have to at least have a provision for consideration if something like that does come about. The other question I have is regarding the paid officer. How I read this, and please correct me if I'm absolutely off, but how I read this is it seems like almost any event would require a paid officer. Is there a determination, some factor that identifies how big, how small, when it is required, when it's not?
Ms. Landry, you're getting a relief pitcher?
Good evening, Council. Through you, Mayor Taylor. Mayor Taylor, whoa, I upped your, I upped the ante tonight. Chair Taylor.
No, thanks.
Sorry, Mayor Post. To answer Councillor Andrews' question, as Karen identified in the review of the bylaw, there is a series of things that need to happen. In particular, alcohol, an AGCO permit for alcohol service would require pay duty officers. Anything beyond that, that would need to be deemed to have pay duty officers based on the size of your event, how many people are going to be in attendance, the length, the number of days, the location, all of those things would be reviewed by the Recreation Events team when we issue the permit.
Okay. And my last question, and I apologize, but just after reading, there was just so much that came to mind. Security deposit. Do we have a defined amount, and does that differ from the type of event?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Chair Taylor, to Councillor Andrews. Currently, we are reviewing our rates and fees, and we will be coming back to council in short order with that. Currently, our security deposit is $300, so it's quite nominal at this point in time. My team is reviewing that to identify large-scale events with a certain number of people that may increase. We have held back security deposits before for special events and private events based on damage that's been done to the facilities and things that we've needed to replace. So it is something that we do implement, and it is something we are going to review. Of course, once the event is over, we could give back that security deposit, or that security deposit could potentially be applied to the permit balance.
Thank you.
Good.
That's
Thank
it.
you very
Thank
much,
you.
Sharon. Councillor Andrews, I thought you were going to ask about balloons over bodies of water. No.
Not going there.
Okay, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, through you, Chair Taylor. One of the things I don't notice in here is any mention about prohibiting or maybe requiring a permit for any type of protesting or demonstrations in town parks. I know that, you know, we can't stop protests and demonstrations, but I'm just wondering, how is that addressed, and is that addressed here, or because not too many people are going to call up the town and ask for a special permit to do that?
Chair Taylor, through you to Councillor Sherwood. Actually, interestingly enough, in the past 2 years, people have contacted the town to indicate, and dealt with our OPP team as well, to indicate that they are going to be having a protest, and there will be a group of people. They've indicated what they're going to do. So there are some people that do that. Without pulling the exact page and going to that, the bylaw does give provisions to groups of people. You are correct in stating that protests are a democratic right, and people can protest. It's in here somewhere. I just have to pull that exact page for you. If I can maybe report back to you afterwards. What this bylaw does help us with is groups of people that are coming to our parks to have a group of people over 25 people, that constitutes a group permit. Oftentimes we have people coming to us to run yoga programs, to run art classes. It could be a variety of different things in our parks. And we want to make sure that we're providing the space to them, but also providing a permit to them so that if someone else should wander into the park and say, well, I want this space now, they would have a permit allocated to them under that provision of the bylaw. Again, I'd have to find the exact wording in here, unless Karen can find it.
Got it.
She got it.
Yep. It's section 5.3. It's on page 67.
Very good. Okay, yep, very good. So my apologies to Mayor Post. I've skipped over you twice, so you have the floor.
That is okay, Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I have a couple of questions and a comment. So my first comment is that I think that putting together this bylaw is extremely important, but the one piece that needs to come with it is to have an easily accessible place where event organizers can find the information, because that's currently the piece that is horribly missing, where any new organization who's trying to put together an event is really struggling to find all the information that they need and the right contact people to be able to do things. And so being able to click a button on the website that says, I want to host an event or I want to rent a park or something would be extremely helpful with all that documentation with it as well. Two questions. One is to kind of piggyback off what Councillor Andrews was talking about with the drones. And I know I'm hesitant to completely outright prohibit them, only because we do have several small businesses within our community that utilize them and rely on them, such as marketing companies, photography companies, real estate. There's a lot that rely on it. So I would be more apt to support it if it was just in compliance with the federal regulations without making it more difficult than that. And then my question would be, for events that currently are occurring, so I'm thinking of things, and full disclosure, I'm one of the organizers of Celebrate Your Awesome, so it's the first thing that's jumping into my head. But for events like that, Celebrate Your Awesome, Blues and Jazz, with this new bylaw and the new requirements to do permitting and those kinds of things, how will that change? How much more work will it be to an organization who's already been doing it for several years and has kind of a rigorous process in place? What will that change for them? If maybe through you, Deputy Mayor, to Sharon, I think.
Sharon?
Chair Taylor, to answer Mayor Post's questions. Absolutely. The application process itself, to go back to your first question or first comment, we are working on that process right now as we speak. Crystal Ransom, who's our Supervisor of Business and Client Services, actually has a draft review of that done. We will be posting it to the website. It will be much easier to find. She is great at her job, and she has a very detailed, very attractive package ready to go. To your third point, for existing events, we actually used our existing events as a model. So Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival, Ribfest, Celebrate Your Awesome were events that we looked at for things like our security plan, our environmental waste management plans, AGCO permit applications, and we looked at those first and foremost to identify what's been currently done and where we need to get to. What we're finding is that we need to know the details that's happening in those events. So as Karen alluded to, that checklist, I actually spoke with Crystal this morning about this topic. We will have a centralized intake for the application process. And then once we get that intake, we will work with that user group to identify the list of things that come as the next phase. We have been in positions where we've had petting zoos at events and we've had exotic animals, and I wander by those events and I close my eyes and say, oh, let's add that to the checklist. In terms of drones, Karen alluded to that earlier. Jason Hollows, who is our IT manager, is very well versed in this, has a license, I believe, himself, and he has gone over the federal regulations for us. Just to note that the downtown core, in proximity to the hospital, is actually a no-fly zone, and Jason has those maps to help us identify where drones can and cannot be flown. So if council chooses to look further into that, I think that we could ask Mr. Hall for his expertise to help us with those federal regulations.
Very good. Thank you. Any other further comments from council? Yes, Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Chair Taylor. So again, I see it's addressed about no camping allowed in the parks. Is that including encampments on any town property?
Chair Taylor, if I could just ask Councillor Sherwood, in terms, could you define encampment for me?
So I'm thinking of an individual that may just set up a tent.
Oh, in terms of somebody,
Like a homeless.
an underhomed individual.
You know, could
potentially.
be an encampment in some cases could be multiple.
Right. Chair Taylor, I'd have to turn to Ms. Landry or Mr. Osmond to answer that in terms of other bylaw regulations.
Mr. Osmond?
Thank you very much, Sharon. Through you, Chair Taylor, to Councillor Sherwood. It's a good question. First, I want to say that to the staff that worked on this has been quite an exhausting process, a long process. And I want to thank Karen for the leadership on that, because with her experience in the bylaw piece, that's why we kind of try to get her to focus on it. The old camping issue is a big one, because just leaving camping aside for a second, camping in a park is not permitted in Orangeville. And, you know, you can have camping as a special event, as an example, and I've used them many times. I mean, you have 10 cities. You have 10 cities for kids, shut down a ball field, turn it into a camping city for a night, and all these as a special event. But if I show up in a park and want to set up a tent and stay for a night, that's not permitted. And in most municipalities that we looked at and all the comparative data, they don't allow camping in their parks because it creates a whole bunch of other issues. Encampment is when the thing, you know, when a person, for whatever person, you know, finds that's their home, and that's not permitted. And the question would be how you deal with something like that if it showed up on one of your woodlots or one of your parks per se, actual parks, fields, and we would have a deal with that as a one-on-one situation. But right now, you cannot have a camp or a tent set up in Orangeville, and it's easy to police that way. But it's better to deal with the exception and have that as a rule. So you're basically isolated, no parks, no camping, and no parks. And the encampment, though, is we have encampments, some of our woodlots that we found, and we broke them down and just got rid of it. We send police in, or in some cases our own parks crew, and we dismantle it and take it away. And but encampments do show up, and when they do, we do dismantle. And my only caution, I guess, would be some of the issues we're dealing with now with homelessness and so on. We do find that these things pop up, and we'd have to deal with that situation, an isolated situation.
Just to follow up, do you think that needs to be specified in this bylaw?
I don't think it needs to be specified in the bylaw. I think the bylaw's got lots of room that you can, you know, that you basically restrict camping. But then when situations arise, then from a encampment perspective, or someone were creating an encampment somewhere on one of our woodlots, we have lots of large woodlots, then you got to deal with those one-on-one. Using the word encampment, we would have to go back and take a look at how you're going to deal with that, because it goes beyond the parks piece, if you would. It goes into the broader question about what you would allow in your community, anywhere in your community, that someone just decides, well, I'm going to sit up one. If you take a drive down Highway 6 and there's a whole whack of them on one side of the highway, that's a difficult one to deal with. And you really got to look at it as an isolated situation. It's probably would be a great discussion down the road for us to look at that.
Very good. Any further comments, councillors? No? Okay. So we do not need a motion because this has been received at a previous meeting. So at this time, I will hand the reins back to you, Mayor Post.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Taylor. Great job taking care of your first special meetings. We'll move on to bylaws. There's a recommendation that bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. It's just the confirmatory bylaw tonight for the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its closed and council public meeting held today, February 13th, 2023. Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Andrews and Deputy Mayor, all in favor? That's carried unanimously, and a motion to adjourn. Councillor McIntosh and Deputy Mayor, all in favor? Thank you very much. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.